The dust storm had blown her last pair of shoes to tatters, but nothing would stop Hannah Abbott from attending Sunday service, not even her bare, bleeding feet. It was May 1874 in Redemption Creek, a struggling settlement in the Arizona Territory, and Hannah had already endured more than most women twice her age. Hannah paused at the church doors, her calloused feet leaving small, dusty prints on the wooden steps. 6 months a widow, with 2 small children waiting for her back at their crumbling homestead, she straightened her threadbare dress and lifted her chin. The congregation would whisper, as they always did the poor Abbott woman, with her failing farm and her dead husband. Quincy Adler noticed her first. He sat in the back pew, his weather-beaten Stetson balanced on his knee, his boots freshly polished despite the trail dust that clung to everything else he owned. He'd ridden into town just 3 days prior, seeking nothing more than a hot meal and perhaps work at one of the local ranches. What he found instead was a town in need, and a woman standing in the church doorway who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her narrow shoulders. Hannah felt the eyes upon her as she stepped inside, her gaze fixed forward, determined not to acknowledge the whispers that followed her down the aisle. The floorboards felt cool against her raw soles, a momentary relief from the burning sensation that had accompanied her 2-mile walk. Mama always said pride would keep a person's back straight when nothing else could, she whispered to herself, finding a place in the last row, as far from the pulpit as possible. Quincy couldn't stop staring. The woman was too thin but carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke volumes. Her dress was faded and mended in several places, but clean and pressed. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple knot, though several strands had escaped, framing a face that might have been pretty before grief had etched itself into the lines around her eyes. But it was her bare feet that struck him hardest. Dirty, bleeding in places, they told a story of desperation and determination that made his chest tighten. When Reverend Miller began the service, Quincy found himself unable to concentrate on the sermon. His mind was racing, calculating the distance to the general store, wondering if it would be open after service on a Sunday. Hannah kept her head bowed throughout much of the service, partly in prayer, but mostly to avoid meeting the pitying gazes of her neighbors. When the final hymn began, she remained seated, knowing the pain of standing on her torn feet would be too much to bear for the duration of the song. As the congregation filed out, offering polite nods and murmured greetings to one another, Hannah waited. She would leave last, when fewer eyes would be upon her. Mrs. Abbott, Reverend Miller approached her, concern etched across his kindly face. "I noticed you walking in without shoes again. The church fund could." "Thank you, Reverend," Hannah interrupted gently, "but we're managing just fine." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but pride was all she had left. "The children have shoes. That's what matters." The Reverend nodded, though his eyes held doubt. "Well, the Lord provides, sometimes in mysterious ways." Hannah offered a tight smile in response. If the Lord had been providing, he'd been remarkably subtle about it these past months. By the time the church had emptied, the sun was high overhead, promising a scorching walk home. Hannah steeled herself for the pain, rose from the pew, and made her way slowly toward the door. She was halfway down the aisle when the church door swung open, flooding the dim interior with harsh sunlight. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, hat in hand. "Mrs. Abbott?" The man's voice was deep, with a slight Eastern accent that marked him as an outsider. Hannah squinted against the light. "Yes." The stranger stepped forward, and she recognized him as the newcomer who'd been staying at the boarding house. He carried a package wrapped in brown paper. "Quincy Adler, madam." He offered a small bow of his head. "I hope you'll forgive my forwardness, but I noticed you were in need of these." He placed the package on the nearest pew and stepped back respectfully. Hannah approached cautiously. "Mr. Adler, I don't take charity." "Not charity, madam." His blue eyes held hers steadily. Consider it an investment in a neighbor. Been told by several folks in town that you raise the finest chickens in the territory. I'd be obliged if you'd sell me a few when they're ready. Hannah's eyes narrowed suspiciously. My chickens won't be laying well for another month at least. I'm a patient man. He gestured to the package. Please. With reluctant fingers, Hannah unwrapped the paper to find a pair of sturdy leather boots. Simple, practical, but well-made. Beside them lay a pair of cotton stockings. These are men's boots, she observed, her voice tight with emotion she refused to show. Only ones they had that looked sturdy enough for farm work. Shopkeeper threw in the stockings. Quincy shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. I guessed at the size. If they don't fit, I can exchange them. Hannah touched the leather gingerly, as if it might disappear. Why would you do this, Mr. Adler?
You don't know me.
My mother walked barefoot to church once, he said simply. Proud woman like yourself. Never forgot the look on her face. He backed toward the door. Good day, Mrs. Abbott. Before Hannah could respond, he was gone, the church door closing softly behind him. She sat on the pew, stockings and boots in her lap, tears threatening despite her best efforts. Slowly, she pulled on the stockings, wincing as the fabric touched her raw skin. The boots were indeed too large, but with the stockings, they would serve. When she stood, the relief was immediate and overwhelming. Outside, Quincy Adler mounted his horse, tipping his hat to Reverend Miller, who stood watching from the church steps with a knowing smile. That was a kindness, Mr. Adler, the Reverend said. Quincy shrugged. Just boots, Reverend. Sometimes boots are more than boots. The older man's eyes twinkled. Hannah Abbott is a good woman who's had more than her share of hardship. Buried her husband this past winter. Pneumonia took him fast. Left her with 2 little ones and a homestead claim that's barely producing. Quincy glanced back at the church. She's proud. Too proud for her own good sometimes. Refuses help from most folks. She took the boots. That she did. The Reverend nodded thoughtfully. That she did. Hannah emerged from the church moments later, walking carefully in her new boots. She spotted Quincy on horseback and approached, her face a careful mask of composure. Mr. Adler, she called. About those chickens. If you're serious about buying some, you're welcome to come by the farm and see them. Perhaps next Sunday after service? Quincy touched the brim of his hat. Would be my pleasure, Mrs. Abbott. As Hannah began the long walk home, her feet protected for the first time in months, she found herself thinking about the stranger's kind eyes. She pushed the thought away quickly. She was a widow with children and a failing farm. There was no room in her life for noticing a man's eyes, especially not a drifter who'd likely be gone before the month was out. Yet as she walked, she found herself hoping, for the first time in a long while, that Sunday would come quickly. The Abbott homestead sat nestled against a backdrop of scrubby hills, a modest cabin with a small barn and chicken coop beside it. A vegetata garden, struggling but surviving, spread out behind the house, irrigated by a small creek that wound its way down from the hills. Hannah's children came running as she approached, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old James, their faces lighting up at the sight of their mother.
Mama.
You got boots, Lily exclaimed, pointing. James wrapped his arms around Hannah's legs. Are they magic boots? Can you walk faster now? Hannah laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuineness. Not magic, just leather. But yes, I can walk much better now. She knelt to hug them properly. Were you good for Mrs. Finch? Their elderly neighbor nodded from the porch, where she sat mending. Angels, both of them. Helped me gather eggs and everything. Thank you for watching them, Ruth. I don't know what I'd do without you. The older woman waved away her thanks. Town's buzzing about that new fellow. Quite handsome, they say. Her eyes twinkled with mischief. Bought those boots at Johnson's store this morning. Paid extra to have them ready after service. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. He's just being neighborly.
Mom.
Ruth gathered her sewing. Well, this neighbor is heading home before the heat gets worse. You need anything before Sunday? We're fine, truly. After Ruth left, Hannah prepared a simple lunch for the children, her mind wandering to Quincy Adler more often than she cared to admit. There was something about his straightforward manner that intrigued her. No pity in those blue eyes, just a quiet understanding. "Mama, who gave you the boots?" Lily asked over their meal of beans and cornbread. "A new man in town, Mr. Adler." "Is he nice?" James piped up, cornbread crumbs dotting his chin. Hannah considered the question. "Yes, I believe he is." "Papa was nice," Lily said quietly, and Hannah felt the familiar ache in her chest. "Yes, he was," she agreed, reaching across to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Very nice." That night, after the children were asleep, Hannah sat on the edge of her bed and removed the boots. Her feet were sore but healing, protected from the day's labors by Quincy Adler's gift. She placed the boots carefully beside her bed, running her fingers over the sturdy leather. "Just boots," she told herself firmly. Not a gesture of anything more than Christian charity from a passing stranger. Yet as she lay in the darkness, listening to the coyotes calling in the distance, Hannah found herself wondering what Quincy Adler's story might be. What brought a man with an Eastern accent to the Arizona territory? Why had her bare feet in church moved him to such generosity? Questions without answers, she decided as sleep finally claimed her. And likely to remain that way. The week passed in a blur of chores, tending the garden, caring for the chickens, patching the roof, where spring rains had found their way through. By Saturday, Hannah had convinced herself that Quincy Adler had forgotten all about his promise to visit after Sunday service. Men made promises easily and broke them just as easily, she'd learned. But Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, and as Hannah dressed for church, she found herself taking extra care with her appearance. She washed her hair and twisted it into a neater knot than usual. She chose her best dress, faded blue calico, but clean and properly mended. The boots, polished with a bit of oil, completed her ensemble. "You look pretty, Mama," Lily observed as they walked to church, her small hand in Hannah's.
Thank you, sweetheart.
"It's important to look our best for church." "And for Mr. Adler?" the child asked innocently. Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "For ourselves," she corrected gently. "We dress properly because it shows respect for ourselves and others." James, skipping ahead of them, turned and walked backward. "Can Mr. Adler stay for dinner? I want to show him my rock collection." "We'll see," Hannah replied noncommittally. "He's probably very busy." The church was fuller than usual, word having spread about the handsome newcomer who'd bought boots for the Abbott widow. Hannah felt eyes following her as she made her way to a pew, the children trailing behind her. Quincy Adler sat near the back, as he had the previous Sunday. He nodded politely as their eyes met, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Hannah returned the nod, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. Throughout the service, she was acutely aware of his presence behind her. When the final hymn ended and the congregation began to disperse, Hannah found herself hesitating, unsure whether to approach him or wait for him to come to her. The decision was made for her when Lily broke away, marching directly to where Quincy stood talking with the blacksmith. "Mr. Adler," the child announced, "Mama says you might come see our chickens today." Quincy looked down, his expression softening. "That's right, miss. If the invitation still stands." "It does," Hannah said, approaching with James in tow. "If you're not otherwise engaged." "No other engagements, madam." He tipped his hat to the blacksmith and turned his attention fully to Hannah. "Though I should warn you, I know next to nothing about chickens." Hannah couldn't help but smile. Then consider it an educational visit. They walked together, the children darting ahead, occasionally circling back like excited puppies. Quincy matched his stride to Hannah's, careful not to walk too quickly despite his longer legs. The boots seem to fit well enough, he observed. They're perfect, Hannah replied. I can't thank you enough. No thanks needed. He gestured to her feet. How's the farm coming along? I hear spring can be a challenging time. It is. Hannah sighed. The garden's coming in slowly. We lost some crops to frost in April. The chickens are doing well, though. And you manage it all alone? I have the children. They help as much as they can, and neighbors pitch in occasionally. She glanced at him. What about you, Mr. Adler? What brings you to our little corner of nowhere? Quincy adjusted his hat. Looking for a place to put down roots, I suppose. Spent too many years drifting after the war. You fought. Union cavalry. He nodded. Afterward, tried going back east, but everything had changed. Or maybe I had. Hannah understood that feeling all too well. And now you're here. For now, he agreed. Got some work with the Peterson Ranch. Breaking horses mainly. They reached the homestead, and the children immediately pulled Quincy toward the chicken coop, eager to show off their feathered charges. Hannah watched as he crouched down to their level, listening intently as Lily explained the proper way to gather eggs without upsetting the hens. There was a gentleness to him that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. His hands, strong and calloused, held the eggs Lily gave him with surprising delicacy. Would you like to stay for dinner, Mr. Adler? Hannah found herself asking. It's nothing fancy, just rabbit stew, but there's plenty. Quincy looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. I'd be honored, Mrs. Abbott. Inside the cabin, Hannah busied herself with preparations while Quincy entertained the children. James had indeed brought out his prized collection of interesting rocks and minerals, and Quincy examined each one with exaggerated interest. This one, he said, holding up a reddish stone. Looks like it might have copper in it. James's eyes widened. Really? Like for pennies? Exactly like for pennies. Quincy handed it back carefully. You've got a good eye, young man. Hannah served the stew in her best bowls mismatched but uncracked with cornbread still warm from the oven. As they ate, she found herself relaxing in Quincy's company. He had a way of drawing out the children, asking questions that made them think and laugh. So, Mr. Adler, Hannah said as they finished the meal, which chickens caught your interest? For purchase, I mean. Quincy wiped his mouth with a napkin. I was thinking maybe 4 of your best layers, if you can spare them. 4. Hannah raised an eyebrow. You must be planning quite the breakfast. He chuckled. Actually, I'm considering a small place of my own. Peterson's offered me a parcel of land as part of my wages if I stay on a year. Thought I might start with chickens, work my way up. You're staying then? In Redemption Creek? Thinking about it, his eyes met hers. Seems like a good place for new beginnings. After dinner, Quincy insisted on helping with the dishes, rolling up his sleeves and plunging his hands into the wash basin despite Hannah's protests. The children had gone outside to play, leaving the adults in a companionable silence, broken only by the clink of dishes. Your husband, Quincy said finally, his voice gentle. How long ago? 6 months. Hannah handed him a plate to dry. Pneumonia. It took him quickly. I'm sorry. Thank you. She kept her eyes on her task. William was a good man. Not much of a farmer. Truth be told, he was a schoolteacher back east, but he tried. We both did. What brought you out here? The promise of land. A fresh start after the war. Hannah smiled sadly. William had grand visions of becoming a gentleman farmer. Reality proved somewhat different. Quincy nodded. It usually does. What about you? Hannah asked, changing the subject. Have you ever been married? No, madam. Came close once before the war. Sarah was her name. His expression grew distant. She didn't wait. I'm sorry. He shrugged. For the best, probably. I came back different. Most of us did. Hannah understood. She'd seen the hollow-eyed veterans who passed through town, men who jumped at loud noises and woke screaming in the night. William had told her stories of former students who'd gone to war boys and returned strangers. "Will you really stay in Redemption Creek?" she asked. "Planning to."
He hung the dish towel to dry.
"Though I admit the housing situation is less than ideal at present. Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house is fine for temporary lodging, but not a home," Hannah finished for him. "Exactly." He glanced around her small cabin. "You've made a real home here, Mrs. Abbott, despite everything." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. "Thank you." Outside, the children's laughter floated through the open window, a reminder of life continuing despite loss. Quincy moved to look out, a smile softening his features as he watched them play. "Fine children you have," he observed. "They've got spirit." "Too much sometimes," Hannah admitted, joining him at the window. "Lily is so much like her father, stubborn, idealistic. And James has never met a rule he couldn't question. Sounds like good qualities to me," says the man who doesn't have to get them to bed on time. Quincy laughed, a rich sound that Hannah found herself wanting to hear again. When was the last time she'd joked with someone? Shared laughter that wasn't tinged with pity or forced politeness. "I should be going," Quincy said reluctantly. "Got work early tomorrow." "Of course." Hannah walked him to the door. "About the chickens, I'll come by next Sunday if that suits. Bring proper payment." "That would be fine." She hesitated. "The children would like that. They've enjoyed your company." "Just the children?" His eyes held a gentle teasing that made her flush. "It's been pleasant having adult conversation," she admitted. Quincy smiled. "For me as well, Mrs. Abbott." "Hannah," she said impulsively. "Please call me Hannah." "Hannah," he repeated, the name sounding different in his voice. "Then I'm Quincy to you." He tipped his hat and whistled for his horse, which had been contentedly grazing nearby. As he mounted and rode away, the children waved enthusiastically, and Hannah found herself raising her hand as well. That night, tucking the children into bed, Hannah was bombarded with questions about Quincy Adler. "Is he coming back, Mama?" Lily asked. "Next Sunday, to buy some chickens." "Can he stay for dinner again?" James yawned. "We'll see." "I like him," Lily declared. "He doesn't look at us funny like other people do." Hannah kissed her daughter's forehead. "What do you mean, funny?" "You know, like we're broken because Papa died." The child's matter-of-fact tone broke Hannah's heart. "Mr. Adler just talks to us normal." "I see." Hannah smoothed the blanket. "Well, that's good then." "Do you like him, Mama?" James asked sleepily. Hannah considered her answer carefully. "He seems like a kind man." "Papa would want you to have a friend," Lily murmured, her eyes drifting closed. "He said people shouldn't be alone." Hannah swallowed the lump in her throat. "Sleep now, both of you. Morning comes early." Later, sitting on the porch in the cooling evening air, Hannah thought about Quincy Adler and the unexpected brightness he'd brought to their Sunday. It had been so long since she'd allowed herself to simply enjoy someone's company, to laugh without guilt or speak without measuring every word. "It's just friendship," she told the night sky firmly. "Nothing more." But as the stars emerged overhead, Hannah found herself looking forward to next Sunday with an anticipation that felt dangerously like hope. The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Hannah threw herself into work, determined not to count the days until Sunday. The garden needed weeding, the chicken coop required repairs, and the roof still leaked in heavy rain. There was no time for daydreaming about blue eyes and kind smiles. Yet in quiet moments mending by candlelight after the children were asleep, or during the long walk to town for supplies, thoughts of Quincy Adler crept in unbidden. Hannah scolded herself for such foolishness. She was a widow with responsibilities, not a lovesick girl. Saturday night, Hannah found herself inspecting her small wardrobe with critical eyes. The blue calico she'd worn last Sunday was her best, but wearing it again would be too obvious. The brown dress was practical but drab. The faded green had a small tear at the hem she hadn't gotten around to mending. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, selecting the brown. "He's coming to buy chickens, not court me." Still, she spent extra time washing her hair that night, and in the morning, she pinned it differently, allowing a few soft curls to frame her face. The children noticed immediately. "You look like when you and Papa would go dancing," Lily observed, her head tilted thoughtfully. Hannah's hands flew to her hair self-consciously. "Don't be silly. I just thought. It's Sunday, after all." "It's pretty," James declared. "Like a princess." The comment earned him an extra piece of cornbread with breakfast. At church, Hannah felt a flutter of disappointment when she didn't immediately spot Quincy. Had he changed his mind? Perhaps he'd found chickens elsewhere, or decided against staying in Redemption Creek after all. Then the door opened, and he slipped in just as Reverend Miller began the service. He caught her eye briefly, offering a small nod of greeting before taking his usual place in the back pew. Hannah forced herself to focus on the sermon, though she retained little of Reverend Miller's message about patience and faith. When the service ended, she gathered the children and made her way outside, trying not to appear too eager as she scanned the departing congregation. "Mrs. Abbott." Quincy's voice came from behind her. "Hannah." She turned, a smile rising unbidden to her lips. "Mr. Adler." "Quincy. We missed you at the beginning of service. Had some trouble with one of Peterson's horses. Stubborn creature decided this morning was perfect for a battle of wills." He grinned, tipping his hat to the children. "Hello there, young uns. Ready to sell me some chickens today?" Lily nodded solemnly. "We picked out the best ones. They lay the biggest eggs." "Is that so?" Quincy offered his arm to Hannah. "Shall we?" The gesture was so natural, so unexpected, that Hannah hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow. They walked like that all the way back to the homestead, the children running ahead, Hannah acutely aware of Quincy's solid presence beside her. "How was your week?" he asked.
"Busy."
"Yours?" "The same. Peterson's got me breaking a new string of horses. Good stock, but wild. Dangerous work." "Can be." He shrugged. "But I understand horses. They're honest creatures, no pretense, no hidden motives." "Unlike people?" Hannah asked. Quincy glanced down at her. "Some people are honest too. Just have to know where to look." At the farm, the chicken transaction was conducted with great ceremony, the children insisting on introducing each hen by name before reluctantly relinquishing it to Quincy's care. "This is Henrietta," Lily announced, pointing to a plump red hen. "She's bossy, but lays an egg almost every day." "And this is Speckles," James added, indicating a spotted hen. "She's my favorite." Quincy knelt down to the boy's level. "Then perhaps Speckles should stay here with you. I'll take a different one." James's face lit up. "Really? But she's the best layer." "Some things are more important than eggs," Quincy replied seriously. "Like keeping your favorite hen." Hannah felt something shift in her chest at the exchange. Such a small kindness, but one that acknowledged her son's feelings as valid and important. "Stay for dinner?" she found herself asking. "I've got a stew started." Quincy hesitated. "I don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," Hannah assured him. "Besides, you'll need advice on building a proper coop for your new charges." That settled it. While the stew simmered, Hannah and Quincy sat at her small table, heads bent over a rough sketch of a chicken coop design. His sleeve occasionally brushed hers as he drew, sending a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "The important thing is protection from predators," Hannah explained. "Coyotes mainly, but hawks too. And good ventilation," Quincy added, surprising her. "My grandfather kept chickens. I helped build his coop when I was about Lily's age." "You never mentioned knowing about chickens before." His eyes twinkled. "You never asked." Besides, I enjoyed your children's explanations too much to interrupt. Dinner was a lively affair, with Quincy regaling them with tales of his horse-breaking adventures. The children hung on every word, and even Hannah found herself laughing at his description of being outwitted by a particularly clever mare. She waited until I was adjusting the saddle, then stepped deliberately on my foot, he recounted. Held me there while she ate my hat right off my head. As the afternoon wore on, Hannah became increasingly aware of how natural it felt to have Quincy in their home. He fit somehow, his large frame making the small cabin feel cozy rather than cramped. When James fell asleep on the floor mid-play, Quincy lifted the boy effortlessly and carried him to bed at Hannah's direction. He's heavier than he looks, Quincy observed, returning to the main room where Hannah was clearing dishes. Growing like a weed, she agreed. Both of them are. Sometimes I look at them and can't believe how much they've changed since. She trailed off. Since your husband died, Quincy finished gently. It's all right to say it, Hannah. Grief doesn't disappear if we don't name it. Hannah set down the plate she was holding, suddenly overwhelmed. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing them. William would have known what to do about the farm, how to make it truly profitable. You're not failing, Quincy said firmly. Those children are happy, healthy, and kind. The farm is still standing. You're doing remarkably well. Am I? We're one bad season away from losing everything. The admission cost her, but it felt oddly freeing to speak the truth aloud. Quincy was quiet for a moment. What if you had help? The neighbors do what they can. I meant me. He stepped closer. I'm good with my hands. Could fix that roof properly, shore up the chicken coop, help with the heavy work. Hannah stiffened. I told you before, I don't take charity. Not charity.
His voice was firm.
I'm proposing a fair exchange. You teach me about farming, real farming, not the theoretical nonsense I've read in books, and I provide the labor your place needs. Why would you do that? You barely know us. Quincy's gaze held hers steadily. I know enough. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know your children are a credit to you, and I know that I've thought about you every day this week. The confession hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Hannah's heart thundered in her chest. Quincy, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. Just let me help. As a friend. Friend. The word felt simultaneously right, and not enough. Hannah looked at this man, this virtual stranger who had walked into their lives bearing boots and kindness, and felt something unfurl within her, something she'd thought had died along with William. All right, she said finally, but only if you let me pay you back somehow. Sunday dinners, he suggested, after church. That would be payment enough. And so began a new routine. Every Sunday after church, Quincy would come to the Abbott farm. He'd work for several hours fixing the roof, mending fences, reinforcing the chicken coop while Hannah prepared dinner. The children would help, or sometimes just watch in fascination as Quincy transformed their slowly deteriorating homestead into something sound and sturdy once more. After dinner, they would sit on the porch, talking as the sun set and the children played in the yard. Hannah learned that Quincy had grown up in Pennsylvania, the son of a blacksmith. That he joined the Union Army at 18, fought at Gettysburg and Cold Harbor. That he still woke sometimes from nightmares he refused to describe. In turn, she told him about her life before the war, daughter of a Boston merchant, educated at a ladies' seminary, married to William at 19. How they'd headed west after the war with dreams of building something that belonged wholly to them. Did you love him very much? Quincy asked one evening as they watched fireflies rise from the grass. William? Yes. Hannah's voice was soft with memory. He was kind and gentle. Loved books. Could recite Shakespeare from memory. Do you still miss him? Every day. She looked at Quincy directly. But differently now. The pain isn't as sharp. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Grief changes. Doesn't disappear, just transforms. As summer deepened into fall, Hannah found herself counting the days between Sundays, anticipating Quincy's visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. The children adored him, running to meet his horse as soon as they spotted him coming down the road. The farm was transforming too. With Quincy's help, Hannah expanded the vegetable garden, repaired the barn, and even added 3 more hens to their flock. For the first time since William's death, she began to believe they might not just survive but thrive. One Sunday in late September, Quincy arrived with an unexpected addition to his saddlebags. "What's this?" Hannah asked as he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Open it and see." Inside lay a pair of women's boots, not practical work boots like the ones he'd given her in church, but pretty ones of soft brown leather with delicate stitching. "Quincy, I can't accept these." "You can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "The town's having a harvest dance next Saturday. Thought you might like to attend." Hannah stared at the boots, then at him. "Are you asking me to go with you?" "If you do me the honor." His expression was earnest, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "People will talk," she warned. "Let them." He shrugged. "Unless you're concerned about your reputation?" Hannah thought about the whispers that had followed her since William's death, the pitying glances, the not-quite-hidden suggestions that she couldn't manage alone. What difference would a few more whispers make? "I'd be pleased to attend with you," she said, her decision made. "Though I warn you, I haven't danced in years." His smile was like sunrise. "Then we'll learn together." The harvest dance was held in the town hall, decorated with autumn leaves and lit by dozens of lanterns. Hannah wore her blue calico, freshly washed and pressed, with Quincy's gift boots that fit as if made for her. She'd let her hair down completely, surprised by how long it had grown. When Quincy came to collect her, his eyes widened appreciatively. "You look beautiful, Hannah." The children, staying with Ruth Finch for the evening, giggled at his reaction. "Mama's pretty all the time," James informed him seriously. "That she is," Quincy agreed, offering Hannah his arm. At the dance, heads turned as they entered together. Hannah heard the whispers, saw the knowing glances, but found she cared less than expected. Quincy's solid presence beside her was reassurance enough. "Mrs. Abbott," Reverend Miller greeted them warmly. "So good to see you out and about. And Mr. Adler, you're becoming quite the fixture in our community." "Trying to, Reverend," Quincy replied, his hand resting lightly at the small of Hannah's back. The music started, a lively reel that had couples forming lines down the center of the room. Quincy led Hannah onto the floor, his hand warm in hers. "Remember, I'm out of practice," she warned. "Just follow my lead," he said, and then they were moving, twirling among the other dancers, Quincy guiding her with gentle pressure at her waist. To Hannah's surprise, the steps came back easily, muscle memory from countless dances in her youth. Quincy was a capable dancer, light on his feet despite his size. As they moved together, Hannah felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: pure, uncomplicated joy. When the dance ended, they were both breathless and laughing. Quincy kept hold of her hand as they moved to the refreshment table, his thumb brushing absently across her knuckles in a way that sent warmth spiraling through her. "Hannah Abbott, as I live and breathe." Martha Peterson, wife of Quincy's employer, approached with a calculating smile. "How wonderful to see you out. And with our Mr. Adler, no less." "Mrs. Peterson." Hannah nodded politely. "It's a lovely party." "Indeed." The older woman's eyes flicked between them. "Mr. Adler has been singing your praises, my dear. Says you're teaching him all about proper farming." "He's a quick study," Hannah replied. "I'm sure." Mrs. Peterson's smile didn't reach her eyes. Such a tragedy about William. But life must go on, mustn't it? Before Hannah could respond, Quincy stepped slightly forward. "Mrs. Peterson, I believe your husband was looking for you." Something about the punch needing attention. The woman huffed but moved away, leaving Hannah feeling oddly exposed. "She disapproves," she murmured. "She's jealous," Quincy corrected. "Her husband speaks highly of you. Says William was the finest teacher they ever had in these parts." The mention of her late husband brought a familiar pang, but not the sharp grief of before. "William would have liked you," she said suddenly. "He always valued honesty and hard work above all else." Quincy's expression softened. "I wish I could have known him." "So do I." Hannah meant it sincerely. As the evening continued, they danced several more times. During a particularly energetic polka, Quincy swung her around with such enthusiasm that Hannah found herself laughing until tears came to her eyes. When was the last time she had laughed like that? Felt so light, so unburdened? During a slower waltz, Quincy held her closer than propriety strictly allowed. Hannah should have protested, should have maintained a proper distance, but found herself leaning into his warmth instead. "Hannah," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "There's something I need to tell you." The serious note in his voice made her look up. "What is it?" "Not here." He glanced around at the crowded dance floor. "Later, when I take you home." The remainder of the dance passed in a blur of anticipation and uncertainty. What could Quincy need to tell her? Was he leaving? Had he reconsidered his plans to stay in Redemption Creek? When the last dance ended and they collected their things to leave, Hannah found herself uncharacteristically nervous. They rode back to her farm in Quincy's wagon, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks. "Will you tell me now?" she asked as they approached her homestead. Quincy slowed the horses. "Peterson's offered me a permanent position. Foreman of his North Range with that parcel of land I mentioned. It's good land, Hannah. Enough for a small ranch of my own eventually." Relief flooded through her. "Quincy, that's wonderful news." "There's more." He halted the wagon outside her cabin but made no move to help her down. "The land has a house on it. Nothing fancy, needs work, like everything else around here, but solid. 2 bedrooms, a good well, even a small orchard. It sounds perfect for you." "For us," he said quietly. "Hannah, I'm asking if you and the children would consider sharing it with me." Hannah's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Quincy turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "I'm saying I love you, Hannah Abbott. Have since the moment I saw you walking barefoot into that church with your head held high. I love your strength, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you never give up, no matter how hard things get. I love your children, as if they were my own." "Quincy, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "I know it soon. I know you're still grieving William, and I would never ask you to stop loving him. But I believe there's room in a heart for more than one love. Different, but no less real." Hannah felt tears prickling behind her eyes. "People will say I didn't wait long enough, that I dishonor William's memory. People will always talk," Quincy said simply. "The question is whether we let their talk determine our happiness." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I've carried it since she died, waiting for the right woman to give it to. I've found her, Hannah. If you'll have me." Hannah looked at the ring, then at Quincy's face, open and vulnerable in the moonlight. She thought of William, his gentle smile, his dreams for their future. She thought of the children, who already looked at Quincy with love and trust. And she thought of herself, the woman she had been, the woman she had become, the woman she might yet be. "Yes," she whispered, her decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. "Yes, Quincy, I'll marry you." His smile was like coming home. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke of promise and future and hope reborn. When they finally separated, both breathless, Quincy rested his forehead against hers. I'll speak to Reverend Miller tomorrow. The children, Hannah said suddenly. We need to tell them. Tomorrow, Quincy agreed.
Together.
That night, after Quincy had departed with one last lingering kiss, Hannah sat on her porch looking at the stars. The gold band on her finger caught the moonlight, a tangible reminder that life continued, that joy could follow sorrow, that love could bloom even in the most unexpected places. She thought of that Sunday months ago, when she had walked barefoot into church, pride and desperation warring within her. How could she have known that the tall stranger in the back pew would change everything? That a pair of boots would lead to a second chance at happiness? William, she whispered to the night sky, I hope you understand. I'll always love you, always honor your memory, but I think you would want this for us, for the children to have a father again, for me to have someone to share this life with. The stars twinkled silently in response, but Hannah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges explaining to the children, facing the town's reaction, planning a future with Quincy. But for tonight, she allowed herself to simply feel the joy of being loved again. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Hannah woke early, her hand immediately going to the ring on her finger to reassure herself that last night hadn't been a dream. The gold band was warm against her skin, solid and real. She prepared breakfast with extra care, making the children's favorite Johnny cakes with the last of the molasses. When Lily and James came to the table, sleepy-eyed and tousle-haired, Hannah took a deep breath. Children, I have something important to tell you. They looked up, suddenly alert. Important news was rare in their small world. Mr. Adler Quincy has asked me to marry him, Hannah said gently. And I've said yes. There was a moment of silence as the children processed this information. Will he live here? James asked finally.
No, sweetheart.
He has a house on Mr. Peterson's land. We would all move there together. Lily's brow furrowed. What about our farm? And the chickens? We take the chickens with us, Hannah assured her. As for the farm, well, we might sell it or perhaps rent it to someone who needs a place to start. Would Mr. Adler be our new papa? James's question cut straight to the heart of the matter. Hannah chose her words carefully. He would be your stepfather. Your papa will always be your papa, even though he's in heaven now. But Quincy would care for you and love you, just as a father does. I like Mr. Adler, James declared, the matter seemingly settled in his young mind. Lily was quieter, her eyes thoughtful. Does he make you happy, Mama? Like Papa did? Hannah reached across to take her daughter's hand. Yes, sweetheart. Different, but yes, he makes me very happy. The girl nodded solemnly. Then it's all right. Papa said that was important for you to be happy. Hannah blinked back tears. When did he say that? Before he got sick. He made me promise to help you smile. Lily's matter-of-fact tone broke Hannah's heart and mended it simultaneously. A knock at the door interrupted the conversation. Quincy stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Good morning, he said, eyes immediately seeking Hannah's. I hope I'm not too early. Just in time, she replied, gesturing him inside. We were just discussing the news. Quincy knelt down to the children's level. I imagine you have questions for me. James didn't hesitate. Will you teach me to ride a horse? A real one, not just the plow horse. Quincy chuckled. When you're a bit bigger, yes. Can I still keep my chickens? Lily asked more practically. Absolutely. In fact, I was thinking we might expand the flock. Maybe add some ducks too. Lily's eyes widened. Ducks. If your mother agrees. Quincy glanced up at Hannah, who nodded. And one more thing, he continued, reaching into his pocket. I brought something for each of you. He handed James a small wooden horse, intricately carved. Made this myself. Not as good as a real horse, but something to practice with until you're ready. James accepted the gift reverently. It looks just like your horse. That's the idea. Quincy turned to Lily, offering her a small cloth pouch. This is a bit different. Lily opened the pouch carefully, tipping the contents into her palm. A simple silver locket gleamed against her skin. It was my sister's, Quincy explained. She's in Philadelphia, now with her own family. When I wrote to her about you all, she sent this, said it should belong to a daughter. It's beautiful, Lily whispered, turning it over in her hand. Open it, Quincy suggested. Inside was a tiny space for a miniature portrait. I thought, Quincy said gently, that perhaps we could find someone to paint a small likeness of your father to keep inside. So you can always carry him with you. Lily looked up, her eyes shining with tears and something else acceptance, perhaps even the beginning of love. Without warning, she threw her arms around Quincy's neck in a fierce hug. Thank you, she mumbled against his shoulder. Hannah watched, her own eyes damp, as Quincy's strong arms encircled her daughter with infinite tenderness. His gaze met Hannah's over Lily's head, full of promise and understanding. In that moment, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that they would be all right, all of them, together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Reverend Miller agreed to perform the ceremony the first Sunday in November, giving them just over a month to ready everything. The town buzzed with the news, reactions ranging from genuine delight to barely concealed disapproval. Too soon, Hannah overheard Mrs. Peterson murmuring to the general store owner's wife. William Abbott barely cold in his grave. 8 months is hardly indecent, the other woman replied reasonably. And those children need a father. Hannah pretended not to hear, focusing instead on selecting fabric for a new dress. She had decided on blue, not wedding white, which seemed inappropriate for a widow, but a deep, rich blue that Quincy had once said matched her eyes. Meanwhile, Quincy threw himself into preparing the house on Peterson's land. Hannah visited once with the children, marveling at the transformation already underway. The 2-bedroom cabin was indeed solid, if simple, with a good stone fireplace and surprisingly large windows that filled the main room with light. It needs a woman's touch, Quincy admitted, watching as Hannah examined the kitchen area. But the roof doesn't leak, the well water's sweet, and there's plenty of room for a garden come spring. It's perfect, Hannah said sincerely. And it was not because of what it was, but because of what it represented. A new beginning, a second chance for all of them. As their wedding day approached, Hannah found herself thinking often of William, not with the sharp pain of before, but with a gentle melancholy that felt almost like a conversation with an old friend. I'm not replacing you, she whispered one night, looking at the small portrait of William that hung in her bedroom. Just continuing, living, as you would want me to. The portrait, painted in happier times, showed William as he had been before illness and hardship had worn him down, smiling, eyes bright with intelligence and kindness. Hannah imagined he would approve of Quincy, of the care he showed the children, of his respect for William's memory. The night before the wedding, after the children were asleep, Hannah sat on her porch for the last time as Hannah Abbott. Tomorrow she would become Hannah Adler, a name that still felt foreign on her tongue, but not unwelcome. Nervous? Ruth Finch asked, joining her with 2 cups of tea. A little, Hannah admitted, accepting the warm cup gratefully. It's strange starting over. I never expected to marry again. Life rarely gives us what we expect, the older woman observed. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead. Do you think it's too soon? That I'm dishonoring William's memory? Ruth considered this, her weathered face thoughtful in the lamplight. I think William would be the first to tell you that life is for the living. That man loved you enough to want your happiness above all else. I do love Quincy, Hannah said softly. Differently than I loved William, but no less truly. The heart expands, Ruth nodded. Doesn't replace, just makes room. They sat in companionable silence, sipping tea and watching the stars emerge above the hills. Tomorrow would bring change, welcome change, but change nonetheless. Tonight was for remembering, for honoring the path that had led her here. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the first Sunday in November bringing with it a hint of winter's approach. Hannah dressed carefully in her new blue gown, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style with Ruth's help. "Something borrowed," Ruth said, pinning a small cameo brooch to Hannah's collar. "Belonged to my mother." "It's beautiful." Hannah touched it gently. "Thank you." The children were unusually subdued, dressed in their Sunday best, watching as their mother transformed before their eyes. "You look like a princess, Mama," James said, wide-eyed. Lily, more perceptive, noticed her mother's hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her collar. "Are you scared?" Hannah knelt to meet her daughter's gaze. "A little. Important days are often a bit frightening." "Mr. Adler, Quincy, he won't make us forget Papa, will he?" The question revealed Lily's deepest fear. "Never," Hannah promised firmly. "Your Papa will always be part of our family, part of our hearts." "Quincy understands that. He wants to honor your Papa's memory just as we do." Lily nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Then I think it's all right to be happy today." "Yes," Hannah agreed, hugging her daughter close. "It's definitely all right to be happy." The church was full when they arrived, the entire town having turned out for the occasion. Hannah paused at the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of faces turned toward her. Then she saw Quincy standing at the front beside Reverend Miller, tall and handsome in a new suit, his eyes finding hers with such warmth that everything else faded away. With Lily and James at her side, Hannah walked down the aisle toward her future. Not barefoot this time, but in the pretty boots Quincy had given her, each step sure and purposeful. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Reverend Miller spoke of new beginnings, of God's grace in second chances. Quincy's voice was steady as he recited his vows, promising to love and cherish not just Hannah but her children as well, to honor the memory of their father while building a new life together. When it was Hannah's turn, she spoke clearly, her voice carrying to the furthest corners of the church. "I, Hannah Abbott, take you, Quincy Adler, to be my husband. To share joy and sorrow, plenty and want, to build a home and family together, to love faithfully until death parts us." Quincy's hands were warm around hers as Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife. His kiss was gentle but sure, a promise sealed before God and community. As they turned to face the congregation, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Adler, Hannah was surprised by the genuine warmth in most faces. Even Mrs. Peterson managed a grudging smile. "Mrs. Adler," Quincy murmured as they walked back down the aisle together, children following close behind. "How does it sound?" "Like a new chapter," Hannah replied, squeezing his hand. "A good one." The celebration afterward was held at Peterson's ranch, the large barn cleared and decorated for the occasion. There was food and music, dancing and laughter. Hannah found herself surrounded by well-wishers, many of the same neighbors who had once looked at her with pity now offering sincere congratulations. "You deserve happiness, both of you," Reverend Miller told them, raising his glass in a toast. "May God bless this union and the family it creates." As evening fell, Quincy and Hannah danced together, their movements as natural and harmonious as if they'd been partners for years rather than months. "Happy?" Quincy asked, his arms secure around her waist. Hannah looked around at the gathering, at James being taught a clumsy two-step by Ruth Finch, at Lily solemnly showing her new locket to a group of admiring girls, at the community that had come together to celebrate their union. "Very," she said sincerely. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." His eyes were serious despite his smile. "I want you to know, Hannah, that I understand what a gift you've given me, trusting me with your heart, with your children. I won't take it lightly." "I know." She touched his face gently. "That's why I love you." Later, after the children had been settled in their new rooms in the house that was now their home, Quincy and Hannah stood on the porch, looking out at the land that stretched before them, their land, their future. "It's not much yet," Quincy said, his arm around her shoulders. "But we'll build something good here. Together." Hannah leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the security she hadn't realized how much she'd missed until it returned to her life. "We already have," she said softly. Inside the house, the children slept peacefully. Outside, the stars shone down on the new Adler family, on the home they would build together, on the love that had begun with a simple pair of boots and grown into something strong enough to sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Hannah thought of that Sunday months ago, when she had walked barefoot into church, too proud to accept help, too determined to show weakness. How far they had come since then, not just in circumstance, but in heart. Quincy's lips found hers in the darkness, a kiss that spoke of belonging, of home found after long wandering. Hannah kissed him back with equal fervor, grateful beyond words for this second chance at love, for the man who had seen her at her lowest and recognized her strength, for the future they would build together. In the years that followed, the Adler family prospered. The small house expanded to accommodate not only Hannah's children, but eventually 2 more twin girls born a year after their wedding, with Quincy's blue eyes and Hannah's quiet determination. The ranch grew too, from a few chickens and a vegetable garden to a respectable operation with cattle, horses, and the best-producing orchard in the county. Quincy's skill with horses and Hannah's practical farming knowledge proved a formidable combination. Lily grew into a thoughtful young woman who inherited her father's love of books and learning, eventually becoming Redemption Creek's schoolteacher. James, true to his early inclinations, developed into an excellent horseman under Quincy's patient tutelage, his natural affinity for animals making him invaluable to the ranch. The twins, Elizabeth and Emma, grew up knowing the story of how their parents met, of a proud woman walking barefoot into church and a kind man who placed not just shoes at her feet, but love in her heart. They never tired of hearing it, especially from Quincy, who told it with a tenderness that made Hannah's heart swell even after years of marriage. William Abbott was never forgotten. His portrait hung in a place of honor in their home, and his memory was kept alive through stories and remembrances. The children grew up understanding that love didn't diminish with loss, but expanded to embrace new connections, new beginnings. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Quincy presented Hannah with a gift, a small silver box containing a pair of miniature boots, exquisitely crafted. "To remember how it all began," he said, watching as she turned the delicate objects in her hands. "As if I could forget," Hannah replied, reaching up to touch his face, lined now with a decade of sun and laughter, but still as dear to her as the day he'd stood before her in church, promising to love her for all his days. That night, as they sat on the porch of their home, larger now, but still centered around the original cabin, watching their children play in the yard, Hannah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "If someone had told me that day in church, when I walked in barefoot and desperate, that the stranger in the back pew would become my husband, the father of my children, the center of my world." She shook her head, still amazed by the twists life had taken. "Would you have believed them?" Quincy asked, his hand warm around hers. "Not for a moment," Hannah admitted. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, pulling her closer. "And here we'll stay." As the sun set over their land, casting long shadows across the fields they had cultivated together, Hannah leaned against her husband's shoulder, profoundly grateful for second chances, for unexpected love, for the life they had built from the ashes of loss. It had begun with a pair of boots and a heart open to possibility. It had grown into a love story neither of them could have imagined that Sunday in May 1874, when a widow walked barefoot into church and a cowboy saw not her poverty, but her pride, not her circumstances, but her courage. A love story that continued to unfold, day by day, season by season, year by year, as enduring as the land they tended, as steadfast as the vows they had exchanged, as precious as the family they had created together.